This session will talk about pallet unloading logics as second part of pallet logic. As a state in the homework, okay, the pallet can be released only when the last part is removed and in the processing in packing station. And also, the first part loaded on the pallet will be the last to unload. And this part we call it last in, first out logic. And basically, the first part you put it on the pallet will be on the bottom or in the last to be removed and get processed in the packing. Okay. Parts going to be processed, okay, in packing server one by one in the reverse order. So whatever get on the last will be processed the first. To do this, we're going to set up a attribute called model entity serial number. The other one is using a model variable to keep track of a current entity number. The entity number is between 0 and 10, and we'll call it entity NO. So before we go on to the model, let's walk through the logic one more time. So these are the objectives and the state we're going to do. So now let's talk about the hold on logic. Okay, hold on and let go logic. When an entity arrives at the member input at the palletizer, which is the combiner right here, the combiner, we increase the entity number, okay, by 1. But this entity number, if it's currently greater than or equals to 10, we just set it to 0. Okay. Then similar to the pallet number, pallet serial number, we copy this entity number onto the model entity serial number. Okay, so it's a copy from a model level state variable into a model entity level state variable. So the entity will carry its entity number throughout, but this number can be only between 1 and 10. Once the pallet moves forward, we also reset the entity number equals to 0, so therefore the next pallet can be reset from 0. Also, we would like to add a dummy server after separator server, and this server's only purpose is trying to create a reverse order for the entity on the pallet. So on the pallet will be have 1 through 10 entity. The number 10 entity go first, and the 9, and the 8, and so on and so forth. The last one will be the entity number 1, serial number 1. Okay. Set the process priority to the largest value first on the entity serial number, and make sure the entity passing through the server in a one by one, we'll call it in a single file. So, so the packing station will process entity one by one as well, but in the reverse order. Okay, we need to set up a we need to set up a user-defined event called release pallet event. So only when this event is triggered, then we can release the pallet. And let the pallet wait for this event. When the entity serial number equals to 1, when the entity serial number equals to 1, get to the packing server, then we can release the pallet by firing this event, firing the release pallet event. Okay, so now we ready to gradually start how that the model going to be. So initially we're going to set up these two model entity state variable and the model level state variable, and how to update those numbers to begin with. Okay, to begin with the model, I kind of simplified the existing homework by kind of deleting all the other uh, server unrelated to this logic off first and create a smaller example to run through. This only has two sources, generate model A, model B TV directly fit into the palletizer, and the palletizer is exactly the same as the part 4 of the hint. Okay, and there's a unloading pallet called separator, and originally the empty pallet goes to the sink, and then the unloaded entity goes to the packing directly. So we need to do a little bit remodeling on this part. So let's start from setting up the model entity level. Okay, state variable. We'll call it integer. We'll call this entity serial number for now. Okay, start with a 0. So every entity will follow this. Also, a model level state variable as well. There's another integer. We call it entity number. Okay, this entity number we'll want to keep it as between 0 to 10, and each time, zoom in, an entity either from here or from here entering the member node, we're going to increase the entity number by 1 and copy it onto the model entity and entity serial. So here, very quickly, we're going to add a process. Okay, we're going to add a process called add a process. So first we're going to increase the entity number by entity number plus 1. So increase that by 1. Also, I'm going to copy this value. I'm going to copy this value to model entity serial number equals to entity number. Very similar to the one we deal with pallet. Okay, and then we decide, trying to see if this entity number is already greater than 10. If the entity number is greater than or equals to 10, then we reset the entity level. Okay. So the entity number will be equals to 10. 0. Sorry. So every time we increment the entity number by 1, next we're going to copy this number over to the model entity serial number and see if the entity number reaches 10. Then we're going to reset the entity number back to 0. So meaning I probably already have enough for the pallet. We should start recounting this entity number. So we make sure all the entity on the pallet, either full or not full, will have a number starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. May not be up to 10 in that sense. So this is the first part we trying to do. In addition, when the pallet is finished, when it's about to leave this output node, so before it's leaving, okay, after processing, and when it's leaving this node, we would like to try, okay, palletizer exit. So here we would like to add see if there's no entity. So here what we decide, trying to see is what if palletizers member input buffer content number of waiting. If nobody waiting in the if nobody waiting in this member input buffer, and then we will reset the pallet entity number equals to 0 as well. So we do that. We're going to reset the entity number equals to 0 as well. So that means the when the pallet moving towards the output of this palletizer, if nothing waiting in the member queue, I can reset the entity number from 0. So the new one come in will automatically set it to 1. So that's the second part of the combiner we have to do. Okay, for the pallet unloading portion, we're going to let it stay the same. We're going to adding a dummy server right here in between the packing and the member output. So we're going to actually connect them together. Okay. The only thing we're trying to do is for this server, we call it server dummy. Okay, for the dummy server, actually it goes so-called largest value first, and based on the ranking expression will be actually entity and entity serial number. Okay, we call it model entity serial number. Model entity serial number as one of the values. So the largest will be coming over here. What I did over here is I have this label on top of entity. You know how to do this already, using the entity serial number as a tag, so we'll be able to see how they come in. A couple of things I need to set in order to have it control the flow. First, I want to set the input buffer for this dummy entity equals to 0. So I don't want to have anything flow through this portion unless there is a empty space. Can get processed. And also I'm going to set the output buffer for the member portion equals to 0 as well. So we make sure the entity will be waiting here or blocking the unload pallet before the previous pallet be fully unloaded to the server, dummy server. And also to stop the entity from the member output buffer flow into the dummy, I will convert this path from the regular path to a connector. So in that case, we will be blocking everything over here. Okay. Also, for the animation purpose, I'm going to slow down the entity in this region as well. First, I'm going to set this to probably a time path instead to slow it down so you can see actually entity is going. I'm going to set it for 10 minutes for flowing through here, and also I'm going to add slightly a processing time for this dummy server. So entity will come out of here one by one. You can see they're in the certain order. I'm going to slow down, and you will see they are coming through. Okay, they are coming through based on the processing. And it's 10, 9, 8, 6, 7. I'm going to drag this a little bit. Okay, you can see that going. And based on the, so this part is fairly straightforward. I'm going to run. You can see the entity. I'm going to slow down one more level. You can see entity coming through here one by one in a reverse order, going into packing station. Okay, so this is what I have in mind. And also, if I have more than one pallet unloading at the same time, I will start blocking this unless all these things passing through. So that's what we have so far. And to first ranking this entity coming through here 1 through 10 using a so-called entity number. And increase this a little bit. And just so you can visualize, I can visualize or double check my logic is correct before I turn into the fully functional. So this animation helped me verify my program, my logics are basically correct. And parts coming through here in reverse order, and pallet loading and unloading properly. So we can see that there's 5 on the pallet using this expression over here. And when pallet unload, the entity got blocked right here until all the things got done, then the next pallet. So far we haven't talked about holding the pallet and unholding and let go of the pallet yet. We just set it up, entity coming through here on the pallet that ranking by 1 to 10. Okay, so this part is finished. We're going to ready to perform the next step. We will try to hold the pallet after the separator around this region until the number one entity goes into the packing station, which means they've been removed from the pallet physically. So let's do that. I'm going to stop the simulation and temporarily delete this. We're going to add a transfer node for now. Adding a transfer node and putting time path. These time paths I'm putting on just for the animation purpose. They don't have any real meaning. Later on, I can turn into connectors. So and also, I want the pallet coming through the unload, because this could take some time, and we could unload 2 pallets at the same time, and before the previous pallet got unloaded. So here what we do is we're trying to block, okay, this unloading until the current pallet is being released. So here, instead of setting his output buffer equals to 0, what we do is adding a resource, and this resource we call a key. Okay, we put a key. And this key is only if you seize this key, the pallet can go on to this transfer node, get hold. Okay, so here at the transfer out of this node, when they enter, I'm going to add a process. Okay, I'm going to add a process. And this process, only thing you do is trying to seize that key we have. We're going to seize the key element and seize the key. Since I only have one key, so one pallet at a time, we can get it ready to be released. Okay, so seize the key, and then on this waiting node, we call it pallet waiting node. The pallet waiting node, we call it, when they come into here, I'm going to wait for a signal. In the event, we call the pallet's release event. So first, before we do that, we need to define a user-defined event. Having this, okay, call pallet release event. Okay, pallet release event. So when this event it got triggered, then we can release the pallets over here. So what do we do over here? We get on here and create an add-on process. So when they enter, we're going to wait for that event. Here, what we're trying to wait, event name call pallet release event, basically. I'm going to wait for this event to happen. Okay, wait for this event to happen, and so name this wait for pallet release event. So I'm going to wait for that event. When we're going to trigger that event, and that's the next part. So when we're going to trigger this event, when the pallet, when the entity coming into the packing has the serial number equals to 1, then I know the last entity is removed from the pallet, then I can go ahead and release this event. So what we do right here is when the pallet, when the entity coming through this dummy server going to the packing, only during the process, okay, when they start processing, I'm going to create this event. So I'm going to make a decide is when the entity coming to get processed, we're going to see if this is, we're going to call model entity, sorry, entity, entity serial number equals to 1. If it's equals to 1, I can fire that event. Fire reach event, we call it pallet release. The moment they fired, rename this, fire pallet release. Okay, here is if entity serial equals to 1. Equals to 1, then I can fire. Okay, so what happened is the entity, actually, the TV going through the dummy server in the reverse order and coming into the packing station. When the serial number 1 TV start getting processed in the packing station, then I know the last parts is already removed from the pallet. I'm going to trigger here to have this pallet get released. Also, once the pallet get released, I need to release the key I have for the next pallet come here to be waiting. So in that case, over the waiting part, waiting after the waiting, to be released, I also need to release the key. So the next pallet can move forward. So what to release? Adding that to release the key I have. Okay, and I'm going to also make this a little bit longer so we can see that coming. I'm going to let it go for 10 minutes and so on. Okay, now let's try to see if the animation works. As we do this for 2 minutes, and we start running this. Pallet coming through. All the TV got unloaded in the reverse order. It's still good. And then get a key and move forward to that waiting position once the first entity got processed and the pallet is let go. Okay, so you see 4, 3, 2, 1. One is still in the queue. Once it gets processed, and the pallet will be released. So this pretty much finish our. We can run this to the end, and total using 613 and produce 6,000 TV. Don't have to be like this. I just hypothetically terminated with the 6,000 coming in, and we generate a little bit faster so we get enough. And there's 27 pallets that's on fill before got sent forward. And I think pallet waiting time is about 4 hours in this case. So the systems actually release the pallet in the proper manner when the parts come in through the packing station. When the number one entity, serial number one entity, actually get onto the pallet being packing to be processed, then we can release the pallet. We can fire an event, release pallet event, and the pallet will let go. Eventually release this key for the next pallet waiting over here in the output node to be moving forward, ready to be released. So this will conclude the sections, and we will continue later on for other